Perfect. So I assume you can already see my screen in full presentation mode, and more people are joining, so I think we're ready to go. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this. Sorry. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this 5 Steps to Build Data Spaces webinar powered by the Disco project. So, my name is Carlos Eugenio Gonzales Ruiz. I am Ecosystem Operations Building Manager for International Data Spaces Association. So, we are one of the partners of the big Disco consortium, but we are also partners in the other EU projects that are present in this webinar. Yeah, we're very happy to have you here on board on this occasion. So warm welcome, and I would like to go with you through the agenda. So yeah, the idea of having you today here is to show you some of our general knowledge from the IDSA head office on how to build data spaces. So all of those who are here today are either participating in a EC funded project that is revolving around data spaces, or are already part of our ecosystem or interested in knowing more about data spaces. So we decided to put together all this knowledge in the form of 5 easy steps to build data spaces and share it with you. So let's just go through the agenda. So first, of course, the welcome introduction of the workshop. And then I would like to give you a brief introduction to what the International Data Spaces Association is all about, who we are, what we're doing, and what data spaces are in a nutshell. And then we're going to deep dive into the 5 steps. So we are gonna first hear from our colleagues Silvia and Sebastian on step 1, gather knowledge. So which are the most important sources of information and documents where you can start informing yourself about data spaces. Then I'm gonna share with you a bit about the step 2. So define your use case, what's on our data spaces radar, and how this is relevant for you to define your use case. Then our colleague Anil was kind enough to send us a presentation of his explaining the open source strategy. So for step 3, build components, IDS-based components for data sharing. Then we're gonna have step 4, prepare for go live stage. And we're gonna hear from our colleague Sonia on the IDS reference testbed and then the certification scheme. Then we are going to speak about the 5th step. So what happens after you're ready to go live? So what happens when you want to start sharing data in a sovereign way? Then we're going to have a Q&A session, and finally breakout rooms, so we can discuss next steps individually per project. So we have many colleagues from Disco today. This webinar is powered by the Disco project. But we also have colleagues from Vélez, Tango, and also we have a room for general discussion. I already added manually the colleagues who register via Eventbrite. So after the Q&A, we're going to split into breakout rooms, and then we're going to have a wrap-up. Just one last comment before starting with the introduction. We're going to have 30 minutes for Q&A, but if you have any questions during the presentations, feel free to put them in the chat. So we have many colleagues from the IDSA head office with us, and not just from the head office, but also many of our experts already on data spaces are attending the webinar. So if you have a question, put it in the chat, and definitely someone will answer it. So this being said, I think we're ready to go. So thanks one more time for joining, and let's deep dive on it. So here's an introduction on IDSA and data spaces. And here we start with a very interesting slide. So where do we come from? What's the motivation? What's driving us here in IDSA, in International Data Space Association? So what we want to do is we want to give data exchange this last push, so it achieves its final stage of evolution. So we can see here on this view graph on the left side, we have this bilateral data exchange that is something that's been happening for ages, and that still happens at the day, even though this is a bit rudimentary, a bit primitive. So we have company A trusting company B because they know each other for years, and they share there with each other, but only them. So it's only bilateral, and they also do it in a very easy way, either via email, via letters, or physical invoices, or any other methods. But this is also still very limited way, a very limited way in terms of technology. Then we have the second change, the second leap. So we have closed communities. So company A and B decide that they like company C and company D. They trust each other and they grow into a bigger community, but it's still a closed community. So they do not have access to the data outside these gates of their community, and also the outside world doesn't have access to their data. So this is definitely an improvement from bilateral data exchange, but it's not exploiting the potential of data sharing. And this is what we want to achieve with data spaces. We want to achieve decentralized and dynamic data ecosystems. So many-to-many data sharing. So this is why we have the data spaces approach, and here are some characteristics of data spaces. So they count on a federated data architecture. There is no physical integration of the data, so we do not care where the data is stored, what cloud provider you're using, but we care how the data is actually shared. This is why we have this reference architecture model in place, that's going to be explained shortly. We also need interoperability for data spaces. So, and not just for the components within data spaces, but also interoperability among data spaces. So we avoid data silos, and so we avoid vendor dependency. Another very important characteristic of data spaces is data sovereignty and traceability, because we need the owners of data to be sovereign of its own data, to decide what happens to it at all times, who views it, who uses it, etc. So this is one of the key elements of data spaces. And finally, trusted participants, because you cannot share data with someone you don't trust. We need to establish a trust anchor in data spaces, so there can be harmony and secure data sharing in these ecosystems. So this is the data space approach, and one final slide on what's the motivation behind IDSA is that we want to enable any sort of organization to have access to both sides of this scale. So we want to enable them to have access to interoperability and the benefits of participating in data economy without putting their ownership, security, and value at stake. So we want them to have interoperability, but to keep 100% of their ownership, to keep 100% of their security, and make the most out of the value, the most value out of their data. So in order for them to not have to choose the right side or the left side, and to bring balance to this scale, we introduce the term of data sovereignty, which is the ability of a data owner to choose what happens to its data at all times, who views it, who has access, who prints it, makes copies, deletes it, shares it, etc. So every participant of data spaces needs to have data sovereignty. So this is the motivation behind us, and this is now next slide. This is a picture of who IDSA is. So we are over 140 members from almost 30 countries, and almost 900 people are contributing to the co-creation of the IDS standard for secure and sovereign data sharing. So you can see that this is a very colorful picture, very colorful canvas with organizations of all sizes and shapes. Worldwide known IT providers like Microsoft and Google are part of IDSA, but we also have many SMEs. We have many research institutions, universities. Many of you here are members as well, are close collaborators of us. So we have from 4 continents, and many sorts of backgrounds, many sorts of expertise, and these members are bringing their expertise to co-create the IDS standard with us. So this is the whole association, but we also have the head office of the association in Dortmund, Germany. So we're around 30 colleagues working for IDSA, and we have 3 main responsibilities. So first of all, we coordinate the activities for our members to co-create the IDS standard. Then we are also in charge of the management of our repositories. So everything that we have is open source. Everything is on our GitHub, and even though we do not write the code itself, we coordinate the efforts of our community in our open source environment to be able to bring their knowledge to these repositories and to shape them. And finally, we care for the community management. So this is most of what we do in the adoption and marketing team of IDSA. This is mostly also what I care for in IDSA. So all the networking, the matchmaking between our members and also all other important stakeholders, orientation and strategic alignment for organizations who want to shape their data sharing use case or data space, organization of events, etc. This is also something that we care for in the head office of IDSA. And also here is a very important slide. So this is where data spaces actually come from, and this is where we are managing all the efforts of the association. So this is the magic triangle, and here we have the main pillars of data spaces, which will also be explained to detailed in this workshop. On top of it, we have the IDS reference architecture model, which is the blueprints for data spaces to be built upon on. And if these are the blueprints, then the construction site is the open source strategy. So the GitHub, where all the developers come together and they put together all this documentation and coding for the components of data spaces. Then we have the third pillar, the IDS certification scheme, because as I mentioned a couple slides ago, it's very important for us to have trust in a data space. So we certify that the components and that organizations in data spaces are compliant to the standard, are trustworthy, are interoperable, etc. We're going to also go deep into this. And finally, we have a fourth element that turns this triangle into some sort of pyramid, because it holds together the three pillars. And this is the IDSA rulebook that contains the governance for data spaces, the rules of play for participants. And then we have here how we actually envision a data space based on the IDS standard. So we have the different participants of data spaces, the data owner and provider and its counterpart, the data user and the data consumer. And then we have some mandatory components of data spaces, which are the data connectors and then the identity provider and the usage policies, and also some complementary components that will depend on the size of your data space, on the number of participants, the type of data you're sharing, etc. So these are definitely complementary, but of course suggested. So the metadata broker, clearinghouse, vocabulary hub, and app store. So I think we can go in deep later on these components in the sense of not being out of time. But all of these components, as I mentioned, you can find the documentation on our GitHub, and there's already many initiatives that are developing these components. And then we see here a big picture of the association. So we have the core, which are the assets that I already presented, and then we have the adoption strategy. So we want to take these assets to the outside world, explain the value of the assets and explain the value of data spaces, and make sure that people adopt data spaces as standard. And then after having this adoption strategy, we have the IDS ecosystem, which is who eventually adopts data spaces and starts building them. So we're present in over 30 research and development projects. We have hub facilitators and competence centers. We are part of the Data Spaces Business Alliance, and we are participating in many standardization activities like ISO, IEEE, Sentinel-like, and more to have this position as a world standard. So as I mentioned, we have many hub facilitators in Europe and eventually in other parts of the world. We're part of the Data Spaces Business Alliance with the Big Data Value Association, Fireware Foundation, and Gaia X. We have our data connector report, which we will also circulate. We can also circulate in the chat, where you can find all these implementations of IDS-based connectors. We already have around 27. Most of them are open source, and you can find them, all of these, in this monthly issued report. And one final slide. So the idea of what we're doing here in IDSA is we want to set data spaces as a worldwide standard. So here in the first step, we have the core pillars of the association. So as I mentioned, our reference architecture model, certification scheme, rulebook, etc. This is the basis where data spaces come from. We have been working on this since 2016. So it's already 7 years in the making, the data spaces standard. And then we have our first impressive impact story. So our first successful data spaces. So we have the mobility data space in Catena X, both initiated in Germany in the mobility and automotive sector. Then we have the Smart Connected Supplier Network initiated in the Netherlands in the supply chain domain. And then we have the ByData initiative in Spain, which is an initiative where data spaces flourish. And then after having first impressive stories, we have more and more impact stories, and we need to align this. So we need to make sure that all data spaces are built upon the same structure, that they are all compliant to all these standards. So this is why we have papers like the design principles for data spaces. We have the DSBA and the Data Spaces Support Center and all these activities driven by the European Commission. And eventually, after this is, or since this is already being settled here in Europe and this is already taking shape and being successful, the next step is to bring this to the global markets. This is why we have our activities in both Japan and in China. This is where we're also eventually going to approach the US market. So in the end, we meet this overall goal of positioning the IDS standard as a worldwide standard for secure and sovereign data sharing. So I'm a couple minutes over time. Sorry about that, but this is in a nutshell what we do here in IDSA. And now I would like to give the floor to our colleague Silvia Castellvi from the tech team, who is going to explain the building blocks for data spaces. And this is how we start the first step. So gather knowledge. So
Do you
Silvia,
want me to share my screen?
yes,
How do you want? Okay.
Feel free to share your screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let me, okay, let's go for that. Thank you, Carlos, for organizing this great webinar. And I am going to explain you in very short time about what are the building blocks to enable deployed data spaces, and also how IDS Data Space Support Center is contributing to the definition of these building blocks. I see well-known faces on this webinar, and probably you know the design principles position paper that Carlos presented before. But if you are new on data spaces landscape, I encourage you to read this paper. It's 100 pages, but just 20 pages, first 20 pages are good enough to get the concept of data spaces in deep. And what this paper contributes is on which are the criteria to design data spaces. These are for as Carlos commented, the data sovereignty. So how to ensure that we keep the control over the data in order to allow what we call the data level playing field. The data level playing field is where you can share data and exchange data in order to deploy services, to develop algorithms and achieve developments on artificial intelligence. So with this data level playing field, we are competing to provide best services, and we are not competing on aggregating data on a data platform. So the data spaces are decentralized infrastructure that connects end-to-end points. So this is the third design principle for data spaces, that they should be distributed infrastructure to avoid the aggregation of data on platforms, but also integrating data coming from platforms. And on top of that, we should implement it based on public and private governance, and also public and private funding. We will look into more on how to implement it later. As Anna commented, this OpenDI project was the base for some principles that are being followed by the Data Spaces Supercenter that Carlos introduced. This is a project funded by European Commission as part of the Digital Europe program, and the Data Spaces Supercenter contributes to the creation of common data spaces and providing support on how to implement sovereign data spaces in Europe. So Data Spaces Supercenter is working on the creation of assets. If you go to DSSC.eu, you will find some of these assets that are public available. The Data Spaces Supercenter will provide a data spaces radar inventory, data spaces support platform for the community of practice and also for the stakeholders. You can find on the website also a data spaces glossary and a data spaces starter kit, and of course the data spaces building blocks and the data spaces blueprint. So this data spaces blueprint is a consistency and coherent and comprehensive set of guidelines on how to support the implementation, deployment, and maintenance of data spaces. So going to the topic that we are talking here is about the building blocks. So what are building blocks? The data spaces building blocks are basic units of components that can be implemented and combined one with each other in order to achieve some functionalities that a data space should fulfill or it's recommended. So for that, OpenDI project already defined 12 building blocks that now are under review for the Data Space Supercenter. But mainly, these building blocks were categorized in two categories, the technical building blocks and the governance building blocks. And all these building blocks are needed in order to provide a common way to construct data spaces and also to provide how to make the data spaces interoperable. So if we go into the pillars that are based of OpenDI building blocks. The first pillar is the data interoperability. So the data spaces should provide a solid framework for efficient data sharing, data exchange among the different participants. So if individual organizations or data spaces defines the interoperability, then we will create silos again. So in order to avoid these silos, we need a common lingua. So in every participant that participate on the data spaces can understand each other and adopt interoperable APIs for data exchange. And Sebastian, we talk more about this data interoperability later, but we can see here that we need semantic interoperability. So because it is great important, we need common data models, common data formats, and how to understand each other. Then we need common data exchange APIs to facilitate how to exchange data, but also it is important that we can observe the data exchange between all participants. And for this reason, we need provenance and traceability of the transactions, of the exchange and sharing of data. Then we need trust. So in order to achieve data sovereignty, data spaces should bring technical means for guaranteeing that the participants in data spaces can trust each other, and they are recognized parties and and also can exercise the control over the data. And this can be provided by trust. And here we identify three building blocks. One is regarding the identity, who can have access. Then we have the access and usage control. We need to define common data policies. And then we need to facilitate trusted data exchange among participants in a coordinate or in a common way. Then we have data value creation, and is where we publish the data, is where we make the data accessible, findable, in order to develop further services and enable participants to discover and access to data and share this data with others. And for that, we need data usage accounting in order to track the data use and also extract value of this data and for accountability purpose, for example. But also we need to create a marketplace and marketplace services, publishing services to achieve this value. And finally, the fourth pillar is the governance of data spaces. So here we need common agreements, specifically on the terms and the conditions, regulations under which we are going to share the data, exchange the data, operational agreements, business models. But in addition to the data spaces, to the building blocks, Data Space Support Center has identified key services to implement these technical capabilities. One is the Data Spaces Connector that Carlos has presented before, and Sebastian will talk more later on, for example, on the Data Space Protocol that is linking several building blocks, but also the Federation of Services to provide functionalities to the data space, and the data space register to register the participants on the data space. And then regarding governance of data spaces, OpenDI paper, the state-of-the-art report, introduce 4 layers of governance. When we talk about governance, we talk about on the bottom layer, how to govern the software infrastructure of the data spaces, how to provide the essential services, but then we need governance also the ecosystem perspective. So intra-data space, how to governance in each data space that we are implementing, but also on a different domain or inter-data spaces, we need to establish this governance for data spaces interoperability, how to communicate one each other. And on top of that, we have several common European frameworks, such as IDSA, that we are explaining to know on this event, and Sebastian will explain more later. And Data Spaces Support Center is working on these building blocks, assets, and he will publish in a short term in September a first list of these building blocks consisting on technical and functional specifications, but also catalog and a package of validated building blocks, okay, that facilitate the implementation. So keep in touch and keep attention to the Data Spaces Support Center to learn more about these building blocks. Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you, Silvia. Let me grab the
Sebastian.
screen share. Yeah, I will continue directly, I think, so to save a little bit precious time. Thanks for the presentation, Silvia. Let me connect directly to that one and continue with the rulebook. While the design principles for data spaces are a generic and a broad approach explaining what data spaces are in a broader sense, in IDSA we have a quite specific understanding of what a data space is and what the rules and the foundations are for that one. And that's part of the IDS rulebook. So I don't say it's not in line with the design principles of data space and the DSSC work, but it's specific and contains far more information than the resources that we saw before. So this is something that you definitely should take a look at and take a good read. So the idea of the IDSA rulebook is we don't want to invent something completely new. Basically, reuse existing things and integrate into existing systems, integrate and use existing standards, and add where it's required. So we are aware of some missing spots where standards are still required to be implemented, to be realized, but there is a big bunch of standard that we can already use and integrate into our system and into our specification. The focus of the work of IDSA and also of the rulebook is to be agnostic of a certain industry or domain. It should be applicable in all verticals as a horizontal standard. So that means it has to be somehow minimal so that it can be integratable in all the different applications and domains. This is important because most organizations, most companies, and most people are active in various domains, even if you don't see it directly. So if you take a car manufacturing, of course, it's an automotive, it's a manufacturing organization. It deals with supply chains, it's a logistics organization. Sometimes they act as a bank and sometimes they act as an insurance company and so on and so forth. That means you have to connect to different domains and you need one standard as a foundation to make use of all those things. And finally, well, it shall be as easy usable and applicable by individual companies and initiatives or ecosystems. So this is a goal that we are working on. We are not there yet, but we are improving from day to day to be really as easy as possible integratable. So our main goal is really to work on this new global and open standard for data sovereignty, as Carlos pitched in the beginning of the presentations today. What we do in the rulebook, and this is not part of the normative thing of the IDSA rulebook, but to explain our world a little bit. So we made this pestle analysis to understand the political, economic, social, technical, legal, and ethical perspective of data spaces. And so why is it not normative? We want to explain our thinking of the world, how we see the world looks like. You know, in IDSA is International Data Spaces Association, and we see that data spaces and data sharing is really an international thing that doesn't stop at borders, that is not bound to legal frameworks of nations, of Europe or whatever. So we have to connect those different things to each other and need to be agnostic of such political and economic systems. At the same time, we have to explain our reasoning, our way of thinking, because most of the people that wrote the IDS rulebook come from Europe. Not all, but most of them. And a lot of our line of argumentation is based on our thinking, on our view of the world. So that's why we explain how we see our world. And the good thing is also when we talk, and Carlos mentioned that briefly, that we are connected well to non-European organizations as well. They share our thoughts. So they have a different perspective on the things. They have a different idea of especially political and economic systems, but they share the same goals and they understand the same technology in there. That's a good thing. And finally, we explain a little bit how our work links with other work, like what we do in the Data Space Business Alliance and what the Data Space Support Center is. So this is a little bit the intro to get it a little bit warm on the idea of what a data space in the IDSA is. And for me, this is one of the key figures that you have to understand if you want to understand a data space and what a data space is, because you can see here in this picture two important parties. One is a data space authority. So someone who maintains and manages a data space. That means how to add someone, a participant to a data space via a tool such like a data space participant registry. So to manage the data space and its participants, but also to define rules and policies of such a data space and to enforce such policies in the end that rely on a certain data space. And finally, to manage a data space self-description. So to really put all those rules and policies into something that is computer readable, computer understandable, and validatable in the end. So this is the one perspective, and this is a question if So if you want to build a data space, if you want to define a data space, what are our rules, what are our club rules, what are our domain rules, what kind of legal framework, organizational framework we have to adhere to. That is defined there. And so it could look differently. I'll come back to that in a little bit. So you don't need to have now a picture in mind that there is this one mighty organization that manages them all. That's an option, but not the only one. On the other hand side, you have the perspective of a participant that wants to join a certain data space for a certain business goal. I need to share my data in a smart connected suppliers network, for example. I want to join a mobility data space to use data and to share data there and so on and so forth. And here you see that a participant could join different data spaces. It's not only one data space to join. You might want to be able to join different data spaces, but sharing basically the same technology. And what you need to provide and what you need to bring is your participant self-description, because, well, I don't see you, I don't know you, but somehow you have to provide your claims. Yes, this is me. As a person, as an organization, and you also bring other claims like trustworthiness claims. You stick to certain certification or rules or whatever. Somehow you have to deliver the proof based on your self-description that you stick to the rules and policies of this data space in the end. And then on the bottom, you have the whole management of identities and trust anchors, so where those claims can be verified in the end. So, of course, it's great if I tell you, well, I'm Sebastian, but you don't have a proof, but I can deliver a proof based on the trust anchor and based on the identity. And this is important to understand this, really the foundation of a data space and those two perspectives. And then on top of that, you will find there is a third perspective as well on the data space ecosystem services. You want to add here some cool value added services, like everyone talks about AI at the moment. So you want to add some AI services, some big data analytics, some cloud services, or some other cool services that really bring value into such an economic system. And this is an important perspective from my view, how a data space is structured and how you can build a data space and join a data space, because as said, those are two different things. And boiling this down to a little bit to a thing that most of you will know, the European interoperability framework. Interoperability is a crucial aspect in data spaces because we want to have a data space where, as Carlos mentioned, organizations can easily share data with each other. You want to achieve a certain degree of autonomy. You want to break down such rock-solid supply chains and become more dynamic, more agile. So this requires basically interoperability. But interoperability is not a Boolean value, something that you can switch off or switch on again. It has a couple of different layers. Here in the European interoperability framework, there are other standards as well that put a spotlight on interoperability. And those are basically similar. So, but what we see is that we have at least interoperability on legal level and organizational level, which is something that is dealt with basically on data space level. So this is something where you have to sit together with your club in your data space and agree on policies and rules for organization and legal interoperability. But then on the bottom, semantic interoperability, understand the meaning of the data and on technical level. So talk the same protocols that you can use an API and integrate this API of another participant into your system. That's my job on participant level to really implement and to deliver those things. But it's an integrated governance scheme that has to be provided by and for a data space. This is important to understand. And if we dig a little bit into this one, the one important aspect is here that such a data space authority, as mentioned, could be a centralized organization, so a joint venture or a company that basically runs the data space. Maybe they earn money with that one, maybe they're sponsored by something, however that looks like. But you could have a centralized organization, operating company that manages the data space for you, for all the participants, for the participants' sake. And there are good reasons why you want to do this. On the other hand side, you could just say, well, I don't need a man in the middle, someone who organizes, or we just write down our rules, our policies, and adhere to those via a completely decentralized network. So really build a completely decentralized data space authority. There are good that's a good idea as well, and it has definitely a lot of benefits to implement it like this. So that's an option in the end. You can use both, and you have to decide and to agree how you set up your data space and how you want to have your data space managed at the end, with all the benefits and downsides that you have to understand that. And then finally, at some point of time, you want to think about a federation of a data space. As mentioned, for me as a participant, I can decide which are the data spaces that I want to join, and I have to stick and to adhere to all the rules of the different data spaces, and I have to manage. But maybe at some point of time, we realize that some data spaces are pretty close to each other. For whatever reason, they're close to each other, and most of the participants are in both data spaces. That does not mean you have to put both together into one pot, but you can federate both. And so both data space authorities acknowledge each other so that you can more easily join the different data spaces and roam between the different data spaces and share data and insights in the end. So these are the different setups. And this is your job when building a data space, to understand what is the right setup, what is the right tooling to be chosen, and what is the right operation of a data space that is required for my individual setup. I briefly mentioned that there are different kind of data spaces, of self-descriptions in data spaces. On the one hand, that's a participant self-description, and there is a data space self-description, and I have to manage this as a participant for each of those, because my participant self-description might look differently depending on the data space where I want to participate or share data at this moment. And of course, I have to understand policies of the data space itself. And you need both things to evaluate then in the end. Am I able now to share data under certain conditions or consume the data? And can I accept the conditions under which the data has been shared in the beginning? So this is a concept that you really need to understand, that you have those different policies and rules that are given by the different data spaces and by the participant, and you have to understand what's inside to make a good and wise decision at the end. And so that means that there are really those different kind of policies, and I will not go into the details here, but you have those membership policies, which are the larger frame explaining, so what are the club rules, under which conditions are you allowed to join, and what are you allowed to do here. Then you provide some kind of assess policies describing, so under which conditions, if you are in the club, you may assess some kind of data, some metadata on catalog level, but also in the end on assess level when you really want to consume the data. What kind of contract policies? Now I found Silvia's cool data. I want to use them. What kind of contract can we negotiate? Then what kind of usage policies can we put on top of that on a certain asset? Yes, you may use my data, but only for 3 days. These are important concepts that you really need to understand when you want to work and live into a data space. Basically, what we see as mandatory and optional functionalities here then in a data space. At the foundation, you need to establish trust, because in the end you want to share and use data, but to do so you need this mandatory foundational functionality. You need to discover data. All the FAIR principles apply. Data has to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this is basically what we also implement here. Data must be discoverable. The data contract negotiation needs to be in place. So I want to offer data under certain rules and conditions, and you have to agree on those, or we might want to negotiate those first. You need to understand my data. So that means that we need vocabularies, semantic models. So semantic interoperability using ontologies and semantic models is not a must, but definitely a good option. And you want to provide functionality that is observable. So you have some trusted data transactions inside such a data space, and maybe you need an observer for that. Not every time, but sometimes you just need a verification. Yes, this transaction happened. And then you have to provide a proof for that one. This is what we call basically observability, plus a little bit more. And then on top of that, all those cool things like applications and service processing, this cool service ecosystem that we want to use. We want to build cool data marketplaces, and we want to have those cool data trustee and escrow services. That's not mandatory, but that's the thing that we can build on top of this mandatory functionality. So trust, I briefly mentioned this. This is an important aspect for data spaces. I will not go here into the details of the different trust mechanisms because we don't have too much time. But there is another thing that I would like to put a brief spotlight on if we talk about technical interoperability. What we define in IDS is a so-called data space protocol, which is currently at a status of version 0.8. So pretty stable, but not completely finalized. And what we describe here is basically how those different connectors interact with each other. And there are some concepts that I would really like to explain to you because they are important. What you will need and implement in such a data space connector. It's a functionality from the control plane. So you need functionality to provide the data offering, cataloging functionality. You want to negotiate the contract, the usage contract for your data. This is important, and this needs to be specified to be really interoperable. And then you will hand over typically the data transfer to a data plane. And we describe this to serve on the one hand side scalability aspects in the cloud ecosystem where you want to really scale, and then a data plane could be spin up at some kind of service endpoint, but it has to be controlled by the control plane. So service is started, is made available, and then you can consume it. And of course, you can suspend it, not because you unplugged the wire. That is something that is should be done on protocol level for the data exchange. But you didn't pay the invoice, for example, or for any other reason, I need to pause, suspend the data exchange, and then I can resume it later on. But of course, you can also combine both planes, the control plane and the data plane, into one logical and physical connector, so that you have really the data space connector, the data connector as a proxy, as a gateway that manages the whole data exchange. So because it is described for the whole system level, from IoT over the edge to the cloud to enterprise level services, and this is how we serve those different things. But these are important aspects that you have to understand how to manage a data space, data transfer in the end. Control plane for general interoperability, and then you use the protocols of your choice, your semantic models of your choice that you have in your domain inside this also reusable data planes. One final thing about the IDSA rulebook. So what we have is this comparison a little bit. So how do you want to set up your data space authority? Centralized, distributed, decentralized, or federated? We describe a little bit what the benefits and the downsides are of those things to give you a little bit of a guidance and this decision-making process, how to build your data space in the end. Rulebook is ongoing work. We have a IDSA working group on Rulebook that is continuously working on the Rulebook, so you will get updates every now and then on the document. You can find the current version via our knowledge base, docs.internationaldataSpaces.org, and you can find it on GitHub as well to find the sources of the document. And I can assure you both are always in sync. So just dig down there and read the document. It's really a good read. Reference architecture model, I think I have to speed up a little bit, so I will continue directly with this one. So the reference architecture model then is a practitioner-oriented guide to designing and implemented architecture for data spaces. So if you now want to really build a system and build a data space, let your developers, let your designers work on that one. So the reference architecture model will give you pretty good guidance how to do that and how to get started with building your data space, or to align the tool that you have already with data space aspects. So we structured our reference architecture model in 5 layers: a business function, information process, and system layer. And then we have 3 perspectives with cross-cutting concerns: security or trust perspective, certification perspective, and the governance perspective as a third perspective to describe really a data space as a holistic thing from an architectural point of view. I will guide you a little bit through the different layers and perspectives to give you a knowledge of what you can find inside, and also to give you a hint how you can read and understand the whole document. So we start with the context of the reference architecture model. This is a famous section 2. Well, it's not normative, but it illustrates all the related concepts to the data spaces, because, well, you know, everyone is asking, oh, Sebastian, how does data spaces relate to GDPR, to privacy preserving technology, to this, that, and so on and so forth. And we describe a little bit in this section how the things fit together from our perspective, and to give you an insight and know how to position the whole system of data spaces inside a more global context. But then if we dig into the details, there is one fundamental graphic also in the reference architecture model, which basically describes the whole idea. So on the one hand side, you have the data owner, and we still stick to the term data owner here, while knowing such a thing like data ownership does not exist. But well, it's my data. I'm responsible for those data, and I authorize some data provider, a service, to provide my data on my behalf to a data consumer. And this is where the data is transferred. So the data consumer receives it. It has to stick to all the policies attached to the data and can provide it to a data user in the end. And of course, this fundamental model is also extensible, that the data consumer will become a data provider again, that you can really provide a data value chain in the end. All those other functionalities like a metadata broker, a clearinghouse, an app store, a vocabulary provider, they only work with metadata. So the descriptions of the data and do not really see the data itself. But you have to be aware, also metadata is data, and you have to consider that also the metadata needs a certain level of protection depending on your use case. A key concept in IDS is our information model. So we have to describe data as an economic asset. That means we have to describe the different concerns here. We have the communication concerns. So how does the endpoint look like? What kind of operation can I invoke there? And what kind of messages are exchanged? So really typical standard things. You have to describe about the context, and for all the people that are in FIWare, well, context, yes, but not that context. We talk here about the context, like what kind of entities, attributes of space and time, to really define all those things. You need to define the content. So what kind of representation, what kind of resource is it? How does those instances look like? Is it a CSV file, a JSON file, whatever? Such things need to be described. The concepts have to be described. What kind of data will you find inside? So we don't provide a lingua franca here for all different kind of data, but we connect it here with the use of vocabularies. So you can enhance this information model with your vocabulary, with your lingua franca in your domain, to describe the data in itself. And then, of course, to describe the community of trust. Who is the participant? What kind of connector is he or she using? How is it certified? And so on and so forth. And finally, describe data as commodity. What's the provenance of the data? What kind of quality are you offering? What kind of policy is behind this? Under which conditions am I allowed to use it? And of course, things like pricing also need to be described. But this is a core model in IDSA to describe asset data as an economic asset. And then we have the process layer, defining all the different steps, how to here onboard you into a data space. And well, a first insight, well, you need, first of all, before you can join a data space, you need to be certified. You need an operation environment certification. You need a component certification, and then you can provision your connector, set it up as described by the provider of your connector, and then you put it into live operation in the end. So starting from such basic processes, but also then how to create a data offering. So you need to create a data offering, and this is what we call a so-called self-description. Basically, a DCAT asset that you describe. So this is my data asset, and if you want to, it's not mandatory, but I would recommend add the semantics to the data. So the meaning of the vocabulary. How can I understand this data? What's the meaning of this data? You can add this, and then you can publish both the data asset to a metadata broker that is findable for everyone. You can publish semantics to a vocabulary hub, to a vocabulary provider, so that anyone can reuse it. And latest, when someone wants to consume your data, they want to understand what kind of vocabulary you use, and then you can query it from the vocabulary hub. But coming a little bit to this metadata broker service thing. So the idea of the metadata broker is that you have a yellow pages service. It's cool to have a data space, but you have to find information inside. But this is first of all the duty of each participant of each connector to provide a self-description, to explain this is my data, this is what I'm offering, and these are the conditions under which you may use it. This is the duty of each participant of each connector. And then you can query the connectors for their self-description. And then you can set up a cool network where everyone crawls each other. And then you can also build your knowledge graph on top of that, or you can publish your self-description to a metadata broker as a yellow pages service where you can search and find for cool data offerings that you're looking for. And one important hint here, when we talk here about self-descriptions, we talk about things like data catalogs and policies. Do not confuse this with GaiaX self-descriptions, which are more or less claims. So same name, different meaning behind this. And then after we have published the data asset, we want to consume it, we want to use it. This happens in the so-called control phase, where you start finding a data offering, then you negotiate the contract, and then you can move to the data operation invocation and receive the results. So I described this briefly already with the data space protocol, where we have the control phase defined by the data space protocol, and then the transfer phase, where you use different kind of protocols depending on how you want to provide and use the data in the end. And then I talked a little bit about the connector. So this is how it looks like, at least from a logical perspective. And you will see there are a lot of functionalities inside described. So this is schematics. You don't have to implement exactly such packages as such, but it gives you an overview about the things you have to consider. We have on the right side all the interfaces towards the data space. So you have to think about identity management that you need to implement it, connection to a metadata broker, to a clearinghouse, to participant information services, and so on. And of course, the practical data exchange itself toward the data space. And then you will find inside your connector a lot of functionality that you do have to consider, from identity management, authentication services, user management should be considered, data, metadata management, all those contract management and policy enforcement things, all those things, and then everything that goes to your systems. So how to get data from your system, store the data inside your systems, manage your connector, and so on and so forth. So this is described in the reference architecture model, in the system view, how a connector is basically set up and what the functionalities are that you should implement to have a data connector in the end. I want to close briefly with the aspect of policy enforcement, because this is an important aspect in data spaces, that I want to stick a policy to my data. You may use it under certain conditions. So, and this is nothing completely new. Basically, we know this concept from XACML, for example, where we have a policy enforcement point, and when some data arrives, I can check. So, is it allowed? Yes or no? And then I ask a policy decision point to decide. And if the answer is yes, I can do something. If the answer is no, I have to do something differently. Or maybe I need to manipulate the data a little bit in between. And another important aspect is here that we have to consider 3 different aspects. So when is an action required? A precondition before usage. So you may not assess the data at all because you're not allowed to. During usage, we have to remove some attributes from the data because you're not allowed to see it. You need to do some pseudonymization or things like that. Or after usage, delete it after 3 days. And all those 3 phases need to be considered and implemented by a data space connector in the end. So this is basically where I've been already. You need for that different kind of components inside that interact with each other to enforce policies. So this is basically what a policy enforcement point does. If you want to do something after an activity, delete it after 3 days, then you need a policy action point that can memorize. I have to do something in 3 days and then fulfill the action. Sometimes you will need context information from other sources, from external sources to evaluate the policies. And then, of course, also enforce policy in apps afterwards and provide evidence that a certain action has been taken place. So this is basically described in the whole policy enforcement thing. And so we need this because we want to not only do some access control, which is about provisioning, describing past and present use cases, what is the right purpose, roles, for example, or other attributes. We want to extend this to future usages as well. It's not allowed to forward the data. You have to delete it after 3 days. You will not combine it with other data sources of this kind or whatever. These are obligations that you have to take for future usages. And our job here in IDS is the conception and development of a language for the specification of such data sovereignty requirements. And of course, we support the implementation of technologies for usage control enforcement. But this is not our main job. Our focus is on the language to express data sovereignty rules. And what we want to have is we want to push the box on the bottom more to the right. Today, we enforce a lot by organizational rules and legal contracts. To push it more to the right, to have more technical enforcement, what comes with its cost. So I will close briefly because the certification perspective is also part of the reference architecture model, but my dear colleague will later on dig into the details of IDS certification and give you a hint. There is also this data governance perspective with a lot of different aspects like data quality, data sovereignty, data ownership, how to govern data space instances, a connection to the rulebook, data as an economic good, and so on and so forth. So also important if you want to understand how you govern data into such a data space. And you will find also the reference architecture model in our knowledge base. And thanks from my side.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. This was definitely a very comprehensive overview. So thanks to you and thanks to Silvia. So I think we definitely covered the title of the first step. So gather knowledge. I think we definitely did gather some knowledge. So thanks a lot. As I mentioned in chat, I will make sure that we share the slides and all the links in an email afterwards. So yeah, let's let's speed this up a bit. So I will continue with the next items in the agenda. So perfect. So here we have that the next item in the agenda is step 2, define your use case, and I'm gonna present to you the data spaces radar. So this is a very crucial and important tool that we have on our website, and this is very important for you to also consider to build to define your use case. So here we have the data spaces radar. This is a tool that we use to give visibility to all of the different data space endeavors out there. So either single use cases or data space initiatives out there, and we have them arranged in first of all in different domains. So we can see that the radar, kind of looking like a pie chart, is divided in smart city, manufacturing, energy, and more domains. And we also have them arranged depending on their maturity level. So first, as I mentioned, this is a perfect tool to give visibility to all of your endeavors, and I will mention this across the presentation, but doesn't harm to also mention it from the get-go that we really encourage you to bring all of your data sharing, IDS data sharing use cases and data space to the radar. So not only for visibility, but also this serves as inspiration for others who want to start driving IDS-based solutions, and also can serve as a tool for matchmaking. So here we have the radar, and as I mentioned, here we have the maturity levels of the radar, and this definitely serves as a basis for you to think, okay, what will be the process to actually define my use case. So here, digging a bit into the different maturity levels. First, we have the lead-in maturity level, which is the stage at which a data space is just something that we call a napkin drawing. So this napkin drawing is just a rough idea of what we want to do with the data. So how do I want to leverage the IDS-based components, technologies, and concepts to share my data? What type of data do I want to share? What do I want to achieve with sharing this data? So in a leading use case, you already have the idea of what you want to do with this data, and also who you want to share this data with, who you want to participate in this data space with. Then the second level of maturity will be a case committed. So this case committed use case or data space is when you already have an agreement among the partners on how to proceed. You already have a budget. You already have a project management scheme in place, and you know what are the next steps to bring this use case to reality, but this is still in the planning phase. Then we have a pilot. So a pilot is where you already have a technical implementations of IDS-based components going on. You're already doing tests for interoperability, for connectivity. So you're making sure that these components work in compliance to the standard, and that data sharing is possible, but still this is not a market-ready product. So then we have the final stage where we achieve this market readiness. This is a live data space or a live use case. You already have flows of secure and sovereign data sharing happening in your use case. You already have a a paying scheme in case you're a pricing scheme or paying scheme in case you're charging for the data. You have an access point, you have a website, you have a platform where participants can access the data space, where participants can already count on the different components to enable data sharing. You already have a finished market-ready product live, and you are already achieving all these goals and benefits that you were setting yourself up to from the very beginning of the use case. So of course, the end goal of having your data space is to start maybe in a leading phase and definitely scale up and reach the live maturity level. So we already have over 100 entries in our data spaces radar. 61 of them are use cases and 31 of them are data spaces, and many of them are already in this live stage. So this is definitely something remarkable. And again, so we have this on our website, and you can have a look at the at all of these use cases in our radar. And then I will go quickly through this, but also in the spirit of being fast. So we have first this cross-continental data sharing use case, which is the entity testbed on data governance one. So the idea of these use cases for different manufacturing plants in different countries to be able to share data with each other on regarding their CO2 footprint. So you can see which one of the shop floors, which one of the factories has the lowest CO2 footprint. So you can send your production order to this plant. So this is a cross-border use case. So we have factories from Japan, from Switzerland, and from Germany sharing data with IDS-based components on this demonstrator. Then we also have this for crisis management, this Heraklion resilience data space. So the idea is to have all the information in hand for in the event of a crisis like the pandemic, available for all players in a community, in a municipality, all the different responding bodies, all the different emergency units and health and government institutions should be able to share this data in the events of an emergency. And then of course we have the EU Hubs data. This is an European Commission funded project, and the idea is to also create a federation of digital innovation hubs that are supporting SMEs with the digitization of their services. And the idea is that these hubs can also share data through a common European data space for the betterment of their services, and also for their betterment of the performance they have while giving the services to the different SMEs. So these are some of the many use cases that we have on the radar, use cases in data spaces. So as I mentioned, you can increase the visibility of your use case, get inspiration from others, access also network of the different entities, organizations that have their entry on the radar, and you can track the progress. You can track the growth of your project. So you can become a part of the data spaces radar by filling in the formula. We will put the link in the chat, and we will also share these slides. And also we have a quarterly publication called the Data Spaces Radar Report. We already have it, the first issue of this on our website. And we are working on the next iteration. You can see the most relevant use cases on our radar here. And of course, we also advertise them on LinkedIn on our biweekly Data Spaces Tuesday posts. So this was the Data Spaces radar and step 2 on how to set up your use case. And now I would like to share a video from my colleague Anil on the step 3 build components, so where he explains the open source strategy. So I will go ahead and just share my my screen and computer audio. 1 second.
Hello, good afternoon. So my name is Anil, and I'm working as a senior project manager in technology and architecture team in IDSA. And I will be providing some overview of IDSA's open source strategy today, along with some assets that are worth to be visiting. So first of all, I'm very sorry for that I had an overlapping meeting at the same time, so I'm not there live, but I'm recording this session. I hope it works and it will be engaging for you. So as mentioned probably in several other occasions, portfolio of open source building blocks for IDSA acts pretty much like a construction site. So this is the place where we see IDS standard in action, in implementation. And so there you can see all the IDS components having some reference implementations and also having some frameworks that are making the IDS compliant data space developers' life easier. So I will be providing some general vision about why are we doing open source as IDSA, and also I will be highlighting some of the assets that we have there that can be really useful in your daily life. In case you are not aware of. And if you have any questions or answers, I know I'm not here live, but you can use the chats. And I can say that after the meeting ends, after the workshop ends, I will be checking the chat history and see if there are any relevant questions to open source. Or else you can also always reach out to me via email. So why are we doing that? First, we have this standard, and also we want to see it in action. And if you are implementing an IDS compliant data space or an IDS component, or if you are reusing an existing component that is being already implemented by somebody else, you can feel free to share it in our open source, and we would warmly welcome that. And this will bring more visibility to the projects, to your project, and you can attract more contributors, and you can have support from the community and get more and more feedback from other people, which will strengthen your product, your project. And this is also a great place to increase the reputation of your project, along with establishing some trust within the community. So as the head office, what we don't do is that we don't intervene in the ways project teams work. So you will, when you go to IDS GitHub, you will see a lot of projects, a lot of implementation of IDS standard. And so they are all having their own teams that are working independently from the head office. So as the head office, we don't have any capacity to develop open source software, but we are just managing several repositories to guide people, to direct people to the right source of information. And we don't deal with licensing disputes. So as you can see, the existing projects in IDS GitHub are being legally protected under several licenses, including Apache 2.0 and Creative Commons 4, and some others as well. And we don't resolve issues that belongs to these projects. So what we mean by this. So first of all, we warmly welcome you to go to the project repositories, and if you have any questions, any technical questions, any questions about its use or its future features that they are developing, please feel free to open an issue on GitHub, on the relevant GitHub repository, and ask people. So it will be very warmly welcomed by the project teams. And what we do as head office, so we help people to find the right information they are looking for. So we are managing several repositories that are more content-based, like IDSG, where we are showing the specifications for IDS components. There's also this IDSA main repository, which is pretty much acting like a landing page where you can find what is available in IDS GitHub, and some other repositories as well, including IDS Testbed and some others, like IDS deployment scenarios. So there we are showing and managing some assets that we are having. So all these things that we are doing as the head office in open source is to make the development journey easier for the data space implementers. So this is the main motivation behind IDSA's open source strategy. And we want this place to be transparent and collaborative area where people and teams are getting inspired from each other, learn from each other, and also contribute to each other's work and improve the general level of the quality level of the implementation. And as the head office, of course, this is very important for us to see the standard in action so that we can keep an eye on them and learn from them, learn from all these experiments, and then work backwards to improve the IDS standard. So I will be highlighting some assets. Let's come here. Let's start with the IDS deployment scenarios. So we, as the IDSA head office, we want to have people document what they did, because we are really in the very early steps of the data space technology. Still, there's a vast majority out there which is not aware of what a data space is and what does it consist of, but they hold really important data. So we want to foster the adoption of the IDS standard and the data spaces, and so this is one way to do it. So whenever you implement some, whenever you make some deployments, this can be a component or a set of components, we kindly ask you to provide this information about the steps that you took, what are the prerequisites about the deployment. So just sharing your recipe with others so that they can also learn from your experiments, and also they can find some other stuff on the way that can be valuable for you, for them, and for the entire data space world. So whenever you, what do we consider as a deployment scenario? So this is clearly stated in the main page of the IDS deployment scenarios repository, but also on a big picture, I can say whenever you develop a IDS compliant component or a set of IDS compliant components, so if your implementation contains at least one IDS compliant component, which is available as open source, then we may consider it as an IDS deployment scenario. So you will find more information on the site, and the reason why we encourage people to share it, as I mentioned, we want people to learn from each other, and this is really super important in this for the sake of the evolution of the technology. And you can take as many components as you want and deploy them based on a purpose. And if you document the steps and share it, then it's a perfect deployment scenario. So what really here matters is the purpose, because when you make some implementation, you make it for a purpose. And for example, you implement the IDS testbed to solve a problem existing in, let's call, agriculture industry, then somebody else working in the agriculture industry who is also challenging the same challenge, the same problem, they can also use that one. And then when you watch their experiments, you can also learn from that, and also you get the credit as the first implementer. So, which is a great thing based on the open source philosophy, as you know. So how you can share your deployment scenario? You can either do that via a pull request on the IDS deployment scenarios repository, or you can also use the data space radar form. As you know, in data space radar, we have these 4 levels: lead-in, case committed, pilot, live, also known as level 1, 2, 3, 4. And for the ones on level 3 and 4, pilot and live, we consider them as perfect candidates for a deployment scenario. So you are warmly invited to contribute here. The other one is IDS graduation scheme. So this was like a methodology to assess the maturity level of the components that you are, or the projects that you are developing. So this is pretty much like an agile maturity level assessment made by our technical steering committee. So this is to provide your project more visibility and increase awareness about it within IDS community, and to increase its adoption possibilities. And well, I can just give some examples for that. So in graduation scheme, which is a maturity assessment criteria and process that we have three levels. So IDS Sandbox, IDS Incubation, and IDS Graduation. We currently have 3 projects in IDS Sandbox that are using IDS Sandbox logo that are Data Space Connector, Eclipse Data Space Components, and Fiverr True Connector. So we ideally, in a perfect world, we will have more and more projects here. So one of the reasons why we have few is because, as I mentioned before, we are in the early steps of the technology, and still more and more projects are being developed here and there. And as you know, in the data spaces connector report, we have many connectors, more than 23 as far as I remember. And here, the IDS graduation scheme is like a maturity assessment based on the existing projects. And so this is not a replacement nor a previous step for certification, but this is completely some other thing. But this is a good place where you can showcase your project and provide more visibility to it. And if you developed a component, a project, an IDS compliant something, please, you are warmly invited to apply through IDSA website. Under open source, you will find the sandbox application form, and all we are asking there is just general information about your project and its relation to the IDS standard. So this is pretty straightforward. And then after we get your application, our technical steering committee reviews your application, and within a few weeks, you will get a response. Then 2 of the other assets that we have on our GitHub that is being run by the head office, I would like to focus on IDS Testbed shortly and minimum viable data space, and why do we have them, what is the purpose, and how you can use it. So as you know, on our GitHub, when you arrive, you will see a lot of projects, teams, and people here. And if you go to the testbed repository, there you see the reason why this testbed has been implemented, has been made available here for the IDS community. So the main purposes for it are component behavior testing and interoperability testing against IDS components. So saying that you develop the component, an IDS component, and you want to test it towards the others. And also, as known, this is the step to get prepared for IDS certification. And this is the starting point for creation of data spaces. Here, I will refer to the minimum viable data space, which is the definition of a minimum viable set of components to make secure and sovereign data sharing happen, as defined by IDSA. Here you can see the general description of it, what does it consist of, and how you can start implementing it. So all you need to do is to go to the testbed repository and then click on MVDF. And in the testbed repository, there you will find very detailed explanation on how to implement it. So that's basically it. And as I mentioned, there are many benefits for IDS of IDS open source for people who are implementing data spaces. So whether you develop a component or a set of components, you can share them as deployment scenario or apply to the graduation scheme to get many advantages, like having its maturity level assessed or get more visibility or accelerate the adoption of the implementation. And if you develop a set of components, then you can apply to the data space radar, where we are listing all the best practices available out there in the market. And this will definitely bring more visibility to your project. So that's it. As I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me anytime via email or write your questions in the chat. Thank you very much for your attention and wish you a great rest of the meeting. Bye-bye.
Perfect. So this was step 3, build your components, and even though Anil didn't make it here, thank you very much, Anil. So great that you took the time to record this video. So okay, then moving on, let's continue with step 4. So prepare for go live, and now we will have our colleague Sonia Jimenez from the IDSA head office sharing with us the IDS reference testbed and the certification scheme. So Sonia, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I will present, as Carlos said, step 4, how to prepare for go live. And I will start by talking about the IDS certification. So you've seen this slide already, our magic triangle. You've seen what the IDS reference architecture and the portfolio of building blocks and the IDSA rulebook are about, what they're for, what the value is. And I'm going to focus now on the last corner of this triangle, this is the certification scheme. So as already mentioned, we have to bring trust to data spaces. We have to bring trust to the participants of data spaces so that they can share data in a secure way. And therefore, we've developed our certification scheme. So I will focus my presentation on this topic, how to make this happen. So trustworthy data sharing via data spaces. We can have many different participants participating in a data space. So we saw now we're talking about this one-to-one contract. We're starting to create these closed ecosystems where everyone knows each other. But the idea of data spaces is that you can go to a data space, participate. You don't necessarily need to know the rest of the participants, but you know there are means and there are requirements that all of them need to meet so that the trust is established, so that you can trust the participants in the data space. It doesn't matter if you know them or not. So for us, in an IDS-based data space, you need to have a connector to send and receive data. And how do we make sure this that and data exchange is trustworthy? So what we do is certify that these connectors comply with our criteria. So, and besides the connectors, we also have to make sure that the participants are also trustworthy. So the participants that are making use of this connector also need to be trustworthy. So we start with the connector. The connector is, as I said, our main component for data sharing. And we have established a certification scheme to make sure that anyone who claims to have an IDS connector has developed it according to our specifications. It meets all our security requirements. It has been tested, and it works as it's supposed to be. So data will be sent and received in a secure way. So we've defined a very extensive certification scheme based on 156 security criteria. And here you have an overview of those criteria. So we've based our certification scheme on adopted standards like the ISO 27001 on how to manage information security, like the IEC 62443 for cybersecurity. Also the CSA Cloud Control Matrix and the C5 for cloud computing compliance criteria. And on top of this existing or adopted security criteria, we've defined specific IDS criteria. That's the to test the functionalities that the IDS components provide. And here you have the list. So we're talking about data usage control, communication security, information model, identity management, and so on. And all of these criteria can be found in our criteria catalog for components, and it's available under request on our website. Here you have also the detailed information, what exactly these criteria mean. And for every one of these criteria, we've defined specific test cases. So how do every criterion need to be tested? So how do we do IDS certification? As I said, there are two types of certification, and both are mandatory to operate in an IDS-based data space. So first, we need to certify the components. So for participants, it will be certifying the connector, and I will explain how that goes. And on top of that, we need to certify the operational environment. So where that component is installed, we check the physical environment, but also the processes and organizational rules. And this is based on standards on the ISO 27001. So both things for participants and the components in the data space are mandatory in an IDS-based data space. If we focus on the component certification, we offer currently 2 assurance levels, depending on the needs of the data space. We start with assurance level 1, the checklist approach. This is based on a self-assessment, so on a questionnaire, and also on the results of some testing. So we have a testing tool, the one that my colleague Anil just presenting, the Testbed, and I will present it too. And we get some a log file when we conduct those tests in the testbed. So the questionnaire plus the log file from the testbed is what makes assurance level 1. So is the entry level for certification of components. Then we have assurance level 2, and this is an external review. So we have third parties, what we call evaluation facilities, who conduct all the tests. So this is a more complex, more thorough evaluation that brings also an additional level of security. That's why we call it assurance level 2. So now both assurance levels are available. And as I said, it's going to depend on the needs of the specific data space, on the requirements of the specific data space. If they say, okay, assurance level 1 is enough for this data space, or no, maybe we're dealing here with sensitive data, so we have to go for assurance level 2. So the evaluation done by a third party. For checklist approach, assurance level 1, we have built a portal. So in this portal, once you've applied for certification, you will log in and you will find the questionnaire, and you can just fill in all the questions of the questionnaire. There are about 200, and they are based on previous testing on the testbed. And you can save the results and edit them, and you don't have to do it all the questions at once, so you can save it and continue later. And once all the process is finalized, we have an external review, and so a review by the certification body. And once everything is correct and we check that all the entries are correct, we would issue the certificate. So yeah, you can access the certification portal only once you've applied for certification. So it's not accessible until then. And for assurance level 2, we currently have one evaluation facility in place. They're SQS in Spain. And what they do is they're in charge of conducting all the tests, also reviewing all the documentation. So all the, what I mentioned previously, the security development documentation. So there has to be an extensive documentation about the implementation or the development of the component. So they check all this and they conduct all the tests. And once they issue an evaluation report, so at the end, it's the certification body who reviews it and says, yes, okay, everything's fine, so we will issue the certificate. For the operational environment, we currently have the first assurance level. So the self-assessment, it works the same way as for the components. So we have a portal to conduct the self-assessment. And we also have the operational environment certification criteria available on our website that can serve as preparation for this certification. And as I said, this is also mandatory for all participants of the data space. So this is the overview of the phases to get certified. So first, the most important thing is to get prepared. So read the criteria catalogs, either for components or for the operational environment. And in the case of the components, test these components in our testbed. Then when everything's fine, document reviewed, and all the tests conducted, you can apply in our website for certification. Then the evaluation will be conducted either as in the means of a self-assessment in the portal for assurance level 1 or assurance level 2, so done by an evaluation facility. And when everything is reviewed, all the results are fine, then you will get certified. This is the reference testbed where the test can be conducted. So it's available, as my colleague Anil showed, in a GitHub repository. It's a public repository. We explain there how to deploy it and how to conduct all the tests. So here, and the current testbed is made up of these components that you see here. And we describe how to bring another connector and test it against all of the components. So we test interoperability with these components. And this is the preparatory tool for certification. So this is the first step to check your component is ready to undergo the certification. So what is it for? We can test here interoperability against the rest of the components of the testbed. It's a preparatory tool for certification, and it can also serve as starting point to create data spaces. So the minimum viable data space, but we also have the broker in there, so it can be a good starting point because it's a setup that's already tested, that works. So we tested interoperability of the components work with each other. It's easy to implement, and you can, on top of it, add other components or modify it according to your specific use case. For more information on certification, you can find everything on our website. Everything, all the steps, relevant steps for applicants as well as for evaluation facility. So things like how did evaluation facilities become evaluation facilities? So what processes did they go through? What are the main actors of certification? So what's the role of the certification body? What's the role of the evaluation facilities and of the applicants? What's expected? How to prepare? What are the rules of procedure? All of this can be found in our GitHub repository. Also, the description of our certification can be found on our website, and the certification criteria as preparation for certification can also be requested from our website. We have an important report that we've been publishing for some months now, and we here what we do is we collect all the existing connectors implementations to give an overview of who's developing a connector, what connectors are out there, and also to bring some clarity on how many connectors there are, who is providing which connector, and so on. So this is a monthly report that we publish. In the last number, we had 23 connectors. We will stop for the summer now, but we will continue in September with a new issue, and it's also accessible from our website. So you can download it and you can see the list of connectors that are available, and also a description if they're in public repositories, and all the required information. Also, as some important, or what we are working on from the certification. So we've started certifying now connectors. We will continue developing the certification scheme for the rest of the IDS components. And we are also now working on the alignment with the GaiaX labels. So as you may know, GaiaX are also launching their own scheme what they call the labeling or the trust framework. So they will issue labels for Gaia-X services. What we're doing now is to align these Gaia-X labels with our certification scheme so that we can also certify connectors that comply with Gaia-X requirements. So what we would call Gaia-X compliant connectors. Okay, so that would be it from my side. I don't know if you have time for Q&A, I think maybe at the end.
Yes, so thank you very much, Sonia. This was definitely a very comprehensive overview, and yes, we will have a lot of time for Q&A. I just we have one final step, but I will try to be quick. We are almost catching up to the agenda, so this is good that we managed. So thanks once again, and I will go ahead and share the last step. So 1 second. So step 5, sovereign data sharing. So I will just like to quickly just make a recap of what we've seen in the first 4 steps, and then share a couple slides with you on step 5. So yeah, I think we have definitely seen what it takes to build a data space, but not just to build it, but to operate it, to be able to have this harmony among all these different participants and components and technologies in data spaces. So we see from the first step that there's a lot of information and a lot of knowledge to catch up on. But fortunately, all of this knowledge is not just getting updated and growing, but also available in our website, in our GitHub, in all of our platforms, and the ones of our friends, in the DSBA, in the Data Spaces Support Center, etc. So definitely all of this information is available for you to gather knowledge. Then going back to the second step, so everything you need to define your use case, all these inspiration stories, all these already successful examples of data spaces are up there in our data spaces radar, but also there are definitely tools that maybe we can talk about during the Q&A, tools from our partners or implementation partners for you to have an easier process to set up, to build your use case. Then from step 3, we see that everything is on our GitHub, everything, all the documentation, everything you need to develop your own components is there. And if you have a question, if you're stuck with something, you have access to a big community of developers. And then after you have already built your components, there's definitely the way to prove that you are IDS compliant, that you are interoperable, that you are secure, and that you are in line with all of these not just standards but values and protocols. So definitely there's the way to have a trustworthy and certified implementation out there. So pretty great that we have all these what we have been working on for years, to have it in such an easy way to explain these 5 steps. And now on a very brief way, step 5, so sovereign data sharing. So now considering all of what we've heard today, what's left? What do I still need to after getting all the information, after building my use case, after building my components, and after getting certified? What do I need? Well, first we need the usage control policies and applications. So it's very important, it's critical to have these within a data space, because it's necessary to ensure that only those who are allowed to access the data, so only those authorized individuals and organizations can access the data. So these usage control policies allow organizations to specify the conditions under which you can access the data and process it. So everything you need to know about the usage control policies, and this is one of the many components that we have in data spaces. These are, and we can go into a bit of details, these are deployed within the data connectors. Everything you need to know about these usage control policies and applications like the My Data Control technologies. You can find it on this paper. This is one of our various white papers available on our website, and the link is here included in the slide. So this is one of the things you need after you have implemented all the other steps. Also, you need data sharing contracts, because you need these documents that outline the terms and conditions for data sharing. So what's the terms and conditions, and what are the rights and the obligations of those users who access your data. And if you do not know where to begin, you do not know where how to set up these data sharing contracts. It's good to know that we have the Citra rulebook. So within this document, you can find templates for these contracts. And it's not all about the contracts, but in general, all these legal regulations that come into play when you're sharing data. So we have all heard of all these many regulations, like the GDPR, like the Data Governance Act, and etc. So this definitely brings a challenge to the table, and this is a technical challenge. So how can we make technology follow the requirements and abide and implement all of these new regulations? So this is why we have the IDSA Task Force Legal Framework. So this is one of the task force we have offered by the IDSA head office, and this is also open to non-members, and we invite you to participate. You can find also more information on our website. This task force brings together legal and technical experts, and they work together on how to make these technologies meet the legal requirements. So how can the components of a data space, how these different technologies already implement what's contained in these legal frameworks, in these regulations. And finally, we have the sharing of best practices. So this is why we have the IDS deployment scenarios and the IDS graduation scheme. So the deployment scenarios, like we heard during Anil's presentations, this is the repositories where IDS implementation experts come together and exchange the footsteps to deploy everything related to IDS-based technology. And then we have the IDS graduation scheme. So this was also explained by Anil. So here you can track the growth and the evolution of your data space. And this can also be done via the data spaces radar. So you can also register your data space to the graduation scheme via the formula. Same with the deployment scenarios. So after following all these steps, you need to track the progress of your data space, see how it gets to this market ready maturity level that I already explained. So this is what these are the 5 steps you need to build data spaces. So it's been quite a journey, and definitely this is a lot of information to digest. This is a lot of information to deep dive in and then to discuss internally, but not just to digest, but I'm pretty sure there's many questions. So we made it almost on time, but there is definitely a lot of time for Q&A, and now we have still some colleagues from the IDSA head office here, including me, to answer your questions. So I would like to invite you to just open your mics, open your cameras, and just shoot your questions. So everyone in the webinar, feel free to do it. The floor is yours. I will also have a look at the chat in case you're still thinking of questions. Maybe there's also questions in the chat. I see there are some. So we have a question from Jonathan Converse. What does IDSA perform in its own security assessments to identify access and usage risks in the architecture of the data controller framework and models? So I don't know if we still have. So we have Sonia in the call. I don't know if you have an answer to this one. This question is a bit technical for me.
I have have an answer. I don't know if it will be exactly. So if I understood your question correctly, is how do we assess identity, access and usage? Identity management and usage control, is that correct? The controller framework and models. So it depends if I can share again my screen. So this is the list of criteria. So we have defined as IDS specific criteria, this identity and access management requirements, data usage control. So that refers to the usage control policies, how connectors handle usage control policies. Okay, no worries. So we have defined criteria, exactly how we tested. This is described in our test cases. So in the criteria catalog, you can find the specific criteria that we test, the 156 criteria, and then how we tested this is specified somewhere else in our test cases. I'm not sure if this is what you are referring to. Yeah, okay. Otherwise, if it's not enough, then let me know, because I'm not sure I understand your question correctly. Yeah,
I think
we can move
Jonathan
on.
is writing in the chat because he has poor connection. But he's
it's regarding Sebastian. Okay. The data access usage framework is implemented. This one was, is Sebastian still here?
No, unfortunately, he's in another call. But also, if there's so Sebastian told me just to let you know in the audience that if there's for example this question, Jonathan, if we cannot answer it, also feel free to reach out to Sebastian. I think he put his contact information in the slide. Otherwise, we if you provide your email here, I can make the link to Sebastian. I can connect you to him.
Maybe just to clarify, what we test and what we certified is just the connector. So the functionalities of the connector, how the connector behaves, the criteria that the connector meets, but it's only the component. So we don't certify other setups, transactions, anything else that takes place in a data space. So it's the connector, and as I said, well, the participant, but the connector. So it's not certifying complete frameworks. You can deploy you can deploy your own connector following the criteria and the specifications that we define, and that will have to be certified, or you can use an existing certified connector or a connector as a service, and everything that how you configure your connector and how you develop it will have to comply with our specifications. So it's not like you can come up with your own so to say your own component that acts as a connector, and that will be also certified. So it needs to meet the requirements. Yeah, so it's not okay. So you can create something. It has to be something that meets all the requirements. So at the end, it will be a connector.
Great. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for this question. Yes, definitely. So please feel free to reach out to Sebastian for follow-ups. If you need us to connect you to him, please share with us your email, and we can cover this. So perfect. Do we have any more questions?
So Carlos, I would suggest you collect the questions, and then we see who from the team has to. Okay. So not.
Yes.
So that Sebastian doesn't get now 130 questions.
100 questions. Yeah, of course. Let's see. Let's collect the technical questions then. I see there's oh yeah, there's some questions on Slido. I see that someone put a link here. Maybe let's share the screen from Slido quickly. So the first one, a question on the identity provider. What tech is used for federated user and centralized users? And again, it will be great, Sonia, if you have an answer to this one.
So let me see, because I didn't access that. Okay, for identity provider, the solution, what tech used for federated users and centralized users? What we have now for identity provider is we use X509 certificates that are generated by the components that we define for identity management. So there's a certificate authority that issues the X509 certificates, and the dApps that generates the tokens to perform the data transactions, and it generates a token out of that certificate. So it's a centralized. So we don't have tech use for validator users. So yeah, so that's the solution that we provide for identity. That's the identity provider. It was X509 certificates. I hope I answer your question. Okay, I'm taking the second question. If it's used for private individuals. We started more from a B2B perspective, so more for more for companies. But it can be applied. So the connectors can be deployed by a company and used by a company, but they can also be used as a service. So they could also be that a service provider offers the connector for specific use cases for single users. So it's not that a user will have to deploy a connector by himself, but he can make use of a connector as a service that's provided by a service provider. Okay, let's see. We have, for the question on if we provide a platform, what we have is GitHub. In GitHub, you can find the complete reference architecture model, and also we also have a repository for the specifications of the components. Current presentation slides IDS that does not provide conflict resolution facilities. Move this to the big screen. No, but what's the specific question? Yeah, I don't know which slide exactly you're referring to, but we don't provide conflict resolution facilities. Or do you mean in terms of governance? Yeah, I'm not sure I get this question. Okay, so conflict between parties. So yeah, we don't. If there's a conflict between two parties in a data space, there will be a governance. So there will be the data space authority, which can be centralized or decentralized, and they will have to define, what kind of conflict are we talking about? So they will have to define the rules to take part in the data space, and they will have to define, this conflict resolution. So it's not us. So we provide like the basis or the technical interoperability to share data, the semantic and all of this. But when it comes to governance models and rules, like it's like onboarding processes, all of this has to be defined by the specific data space, and basically by the data space authority. Sorry, how to resolve no, it would be interesting to make a practical case with one of the connectors. I guess you mean for specific, for your specific project. We have the specifications of the connectors. There are companies that have already deployed a connector that normally, well, some of them participate in projects. So that could be a way. You can use the testbed also to deploy a connector to test it. Yeah, and you have the radar where you can see all the different use cases if you want to get some ideas. And also we have the repository with the deployment scenarios also that can also help with ideas. Yeah. I'm going to have to leave for my next meeting. I don't know if anyone else can take over the Q&A.
Yes, thank you very much, Sonia. So I will take over. Thanks for presenting, and yeah, let's keep the questions coming. Just a bit of a disclaimer. I don't really have a technical background. I'm more in the adoption team of IDSA. So this is, as I mentioned in one of the slides, we are the team that's more caring for the engagement and management of stakeholders. So our members or potential members, our hub facilitators, implementation partners, etc. But of course, I can see and try to answer some of these questions, and also to maybe elaborate a bit more on some of these, because I think they are headed in the same direction. So asking if IDSA performs security assessments, asking if IDSA provides a platform to share algorithms or for conflict resolution. I would say it's good to make clear. So here, IDSA, we are an standardization body. So what we're trying to do mainly, and this also was also part of my presentation, we want to set the standard as a de facto standard for data sharing. So a good example is that we're trying to do something similar to what the Bluetooth consortium did. So as you may know, so Bluetooth started back in 1998, and this started as a consortium of organizations trying to crack the next standard for communication between devices. And then some years later, 15 years later or such, then Bluetooth is everywhere in the world. So this is mainly what we're focusing in, but we do not have really a platform. We're not providing the technology ourselves. We're not providing, we're not mediating for conflict resolutions or anything, but we're just trying to give the tools to our ecosystem, so to our members all over the world, and not just the members, but also the non-members, to create these solutions on their own. So if someone wants to take over and says, okay, I want to provide a platform for conflict resolution, they are more than free to take over. So everything we have is free for everyone to access. And if they want to create this platform for conflict resolution and even offer this as a service, so if they want to create a business model based on this conflict resolution scheme, they are free to do so. But since we are in IDSA, especially in the IDSA head office, overseeing many different streams. So the technical stream and what's happening on our GitHub, but also the development of the standard itself and how we are reaching different countries, how we are engaging more organizations, how it's the development itself of data spaces on a European and global standard. We do not really have the resources or the intention to set these platforms for conflict resolution or to provide technology ourselves. But this is more up to our ecosystem. And this is also why we have the different working groups. So we have the working group on the reference architecture. We have the working group on the certification scheme. We have the task force focusing on these legal and technology topics. We have a task force focusing on data sharing on the energy domain and several other groups. So in the end, yeah, this is free for everyone to participate in. So let's have a look at new questions. So when a connector only manages a control plane and does not control data transfers on the data planes, how do you foresee the enforcement of usage control policies? Then again, so this is definitely a task for our ecosystem to come up with these technologies. So definitely we see that the connector itself, this is the API, let's call it the API that is facilitating the sharing of data, and you can also deploy your usage policies here through these automated contracts. But in the end, it's very, very complicated to control what's happening to your data, because how can you say, okay, how can I know when someone takes a screenshot of the data or prints the data or in any other way steals it without me knowing? So this is definitely a tricky question. This is definitely a tricky challenge to address, but this is why we have the different channels for the technical experts to gather. So I would say we do not have a clear answer at the moment, but we definitely invite you to participate in our task force legal framework and raise these questions, because these frameworks, these task forces, these working groups is where questions like these have to be answered. So feel free to reach out to me, and if you want to participate in these channels. I see another question on the chat, on the Teams chat, because this was on Slido. I send you an invitation to Slido, appointed the total email where you can manage the questions. Perfect. No, I'm actually on the website, and I'm replying to the questions on Slido. Let's see if we have new ones here. I see that the last one was the one about the connector. But yeah, feel free to put more questions in the chat. Again, as I mentioned, we in IDSA have different ways of managing, and maybe I can just go and share one of the slides. So it's I would say it's not all about the technology aspect, but also to see how how data spaces develop at a European and global level. So I think there's a slide that I should have taken more time to explain, but I didn't because we were running a bit late. But I would like to share this slide with you, and then see if more questions come from this slide. And if not, maybe we can also just jump to the breakout rooms, because they are anyway going to be soon. But just quickly to share. So here we have the big picture of what we're doing at IDSA. And again, we have the core, which is all of the assets that we already shared and the assets that are co-created by our members. So we have the reference architecture model, the rulebook, the certification scheme, the testbed, and then the open source strategy. But then, as I mentioned, and this is what the team I am part of, the adoption team, takes care of. We need to explain why data spaces are the answer for data sharing and engage all different actors in the world. So make them understand the value of the standard and adopt it. And since this is a difficult task because we have years of development of papers of technologies of etc. And more challenges to tackle, this is why we have different parts of the strategy. For example, we have the implementation partners, which are experts on data spaces that support organizations implement data spaces on a business or on a technical or on even a legal dimension. Then also we have domain-specific communities for data spaces to flourish in certain domains. So we have a community for the health sector, a community for the logistics sector, one for the mobility sector, and one from the industrial sector. And we have many more upcoming communities. So we're also talking of having an agricultural community, talking of having an energy community, etc. Then also we have the minimum viable data space and then the deployment scenarios available on our GitHub. We have services and tools like the IDSA Basecamp and like our data spaces radar. And then we have the ecosystem that adopts this standard. So we have, as I mentioned, we are part of 30 plus R&D projects, both German national and also European. So I'm part of the DISCO project, but also we have colleagues from Veles here in the call and from other projects. Then we have liaisons all over the world. We have hub facilitators, competence centers, and labs in Europe and in Asia. So in the future, we're going to establish one in Japan, a hub facilitator. We have this research lab and competence center in China. So they are also promoting data spaces in their own countries. We have the Data Spaces Business Alliance and the Data Spaces Support Center also supporting this European level. And we are part of standardization activities. Speaking of ISO, of Sensenelec, IEEE, and more, we already content a DIN spec 27070 specification. This is a German standard for data sharing. So in the end, and just quickly, because we, according to the agenda, we should switch to the breakout rooms for DISCO, for Veles, and also for general discussion. I would like to invite you to check this on our website. So we have all this diagram on our website, and we have more information on the different implementation partners, on the communities, on the different assets, and reach out to us. So at the end, coming back from the breakout rooms, I would like you guys to stay for the wrap up. We have some nice next steps, action items, and also I will share my contact information. So feel free to reach out to us in the future. So anyway, this was a very important slide, but I see that it's time for the breakout rooms. So as I mentioned, as I sent via email, I have added you manually, but unfortunately not everyone has replied to this invitation and at the same time register via Eventbrite. So maybe some of you are not going to be able to participate in the breakout rooms, but don't worry. Let's open the breakout rooms for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then come back for the wrap up. So yeah, I will open the breakout rooms now, and yeah, see you guys, everyone together back in a bit.
Da igual, yo que veo el chat, déjalo. ¿Es esto?
¿Se ve ahí o aquí?
Aquí.
Es que no sé si tiene silenciado al participante. Activar el audio, pero...
Hello, everyone. So the breakout rooms have been closed. I want to apologize if there was a bit of trouble accessing the breakout rooms. So as I mentioned last week, I sent an email to everyone with a link on Eventbrite to register, because I needed to add you manually to the breakout rooms. This is kind of a disadvantage of doing this on this platform, but still, I think we can find ways to discuss next steps bilaterally after the webinar. So we're back all together. So thanks to all of you for sticking until the end. So I would just like to share one last slide to wrap this up. So one more second. Great. So yeah, just want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. This it was a big long, but there's definitely a lot of nice knowledge shared with you guys. So I would just like to share some next steps for you. So first of all, let's promote data spaces. So as I mentioned, this is definitely something valuable. This is definitely the next big standard. And this addresses many of the challenges we have when it comes to data sharing from all dimensions, either technical, legal, business, operational, etc. So let's make sure that we understand and promote data spaces. Then also we invite you to become a member of the association. So we have over 140 members, and we're more than happy to welcome more members. So you can get a seat at the table, and you can become part of this wonderful team that's creating the standard for data spaces. So feel free to check our website, and if you have questions regarding the membership application, feel free to reach out to me. And then also finally get your hands dirty. So it's time to roll up your sleeves and set up an IDS test bed, become a member and join the working groups, drive use cases, build data spaces, promote and develop components, and eventually get certified. So everything we have is available on our different channels, GitHub, YouTube, our website, etc. So everything is there for you to grab all this knowledge, to grab all these building blocks and start building data spaces. So this is some of our next steps and calls to action. So and also to remind you that this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. So in case some of your colleagues didn't manage to come, or in case you missed a part, you will receive an email with the slides and with the link to the webinar. So feel free to watch it. And finally, once again, thank you very much for participating. Here's my contact information. Feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn, to send me an email if you would like to follow up on any of the topics. And yeah, this being said, have a very nice evening and see you next time. Bye-bye.